Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing this newly released book, Avatar The Last Airbender, the official cookbook. So this is written by Jenny Dorsey. It is published by Insight Editions. The official release date is the 23rd of November, so I have this a few days early, which was cool. Yeah, let's just kind of, I suppose, get into talking about this. The final thing I'll mention just before we get into it is that you should probably know that there is going to be another version of this book released in, I think it's June or July next year. It is going to be, I think, the same book, but it's going to come as part of a gift set with a Avatar apron. So just be aware of that this is not the only version of this book that there's going to be. There's going to be a sort of deluxe version of this set coming out next year. So I think that's just important to get that out there in case people are more collectors and want to get everything and not potentially have the situation where they buy this book and then later find out that, oh wait, there's this gift set thing they'd already announced. That's a bit disappointing. So just to be super clear about that. Retail price of this is $24 US. And as you can see here, it is a very nice hardcover book. Really nice colors, printed very nicely. You can sort of see the shine there, gloss on the cover. And then throughout the book as well, it's really nice. You have full color pictures on one side of each recipe to show off what it's like in real life. And then on the other side, you get your sort of ingredients list, your instructions, how long it's going to take, and so on. A little bit of flavor text on the top here alongside the title of the recipe. And then occasionally some stock pieces of Avatar art throughout to keep the Avatar-ness of the book up. There are 60 recipes in this book, stemming across each of the 4 different nations, and also a specific section on the Jasmine Dragon tea shop, which is where most of, not all, but most of the drinks focused on tea you'll find in that section. So that was kind of cool to actually have that separate section there. The main thing to cover in terms of the structure of the book, before we get into talking about some of the flavor text and stuff like that, is just that, like I said, 5 sections. Each of the sections starts off with a page like this, where you get a big full color image of one of the characters. I think it's Aang, Katara, Toph, Zuko, and then Iroh for the Jasmine Dragon section. And then you get a page of quite a bit of text written by that character about what they're about to talk about. So in this first section on Aang, he obviously talks a little bit about Air Nomad and the general style of food that they tend to have in their culture. But he also mentions that to help the 4 nations come together in harmony and friendship, my friends and I have collected delicious recipes from all over the world. What better way for the nations to learn about each other than through eating? So the idea, like the previous Inside Editions books, which are like, an Avatar's Chronicle, Avatar Legacy, Legacy of the Fire Nation, they're roughly going for this idea that the book is meant to be an in-universe book that Aang and his friends have assembled. So it's not just, in real life, it's a cookbook that features recipes from the Avatar world, but it's actually in universe. Aang has created this as a part of the way to help sort of bring balance in a way, to highlight to all the different cultures the food of the other cultures and help spread that around. So that's kind of cool. The Air Nation stuff, of course, it focuses on the idea of it's obviously they're all vegetarians, so it's focused on vegetables, fruits, and as well as the cakes, tarts, and fruit pies and stuff like that. So it's pretty good. In general, about the sort of writing of this book, I would say that the book does its best to try and at least present things in a slightly different way, where it feels like some of the information is kind of new. But ultimately, I don't think there's that many takeaways from all of the flavor text on the recipes and stuff like that. I'll get to some of the points where I feel like there was actually some really, really good stuff in it. But a lot of it tends to just be like, Monkey Yatso taught me how to make this, or he used to make this at this point. I now make it for myself and my friends, and sometimes Momo eats it. There's a lot of stuff where it's just like that, where it's very like, I guess that makes sense for an air nomad dish that, you know, Aang, Gyatso, they're the characters who are going to be involved. It's especially clear in the Air Nation section that there's no access to new information in terms of the creative process on this book. Every Air Nation dish is Aang or Gyatso related in some way. They bring in, you know, like, oh, Aang makes this dish for Appa, he makes this one for Momo and stuff like that. But, you know, there's no mention of, like, he learned this dish from his friend. He learned this dish from this nun in the Eastern Temple or the Western Temple or the Northern Temple or anything like that. No mention of the other, like, elder monks or anything like that. No, it tends to just be Gyatso, highlighting that, yeah, the access to sort of new information to make the book more interesting, very minimal, meaning that the writer had to do, you know, a lot of work with trying to create sort of references where possible and fun little things. I describe the writing style as very similar to Avatar Legacy, where it's sort of that illusion of like, that sounds new, but then when you look into it, it's like, yeah, Iroh is just sort of talking very vaguely about Ozai in this book, that sort of thing, where it being phrased in that way is kind of new, but I sort of assumed that from context, and you didn't necessarily need to tell me that because it's not actually new, that sort of thing. So that's the way it goes. You know, like I said, the layout of the book is kind of nice. The color schemes, of course, to match each of the nations. And from what I can tell, like, I haven't made any of these dishes because, of course, I'm recording this the day I got the book. I will say, in terms of trying to do a review on this book, most of my review is going to be about this book from the context of like the new information, the flavor text stuff, because I don't feel I'm exactly the person who can really give a review of how good the recipes are or how good they are to follow, because I wouldn't say I'm a particularly great like cook or anything like that. I tend to eat relatively plainly, and then when I do cook, I try to make it sort of as, you know, quick, few steps as possible, because I don't like to kind of like almost, from my perspective, like waste time on a lot of food preparation. But that's just me. Other people will be much more into cooking and stuff like that, and so that aspect of the book is going to interest you a lot more. So the one thing I will say is that it is in sort of like what, ounces and stuff like that, tablespoons, instead of like grams and milliliters, which I know is sort of more traditional for stuff, but being from Ireland, I am more used to cooking instructions being in milliliters and grams, more so than ounces and stuff like that. So in that sense, you can tell it's more maybe Americanized, perhaps, but it's fine. You can just do a conversion if you need to. You know, some of the ones are about dumplings here, simple steamed vegetables, Appa's apple salad. You can see there with the image of Appa. The images that they use throughout are stock pieces of imagery, but because it's a relatively new book, it does benefit from the kind of new batch of stock imagery that we now have, which we've seen some of through the Topps trading card game that came out a few months ago, as well as we've seen some of it on some of the newer pieces of merchandise, and also the Avatar Legends Kickstarter so far has also shown us some of these pictures. I'll show off some of the more interesting ones as we go through this. But yeah, like I said, the Air Nation section does what it can. You know, Aang at times discusses the idea of you know, wanting to bring back a lot of the recipes that have kind of been lost, and how he's done that through sort of scrolls that he's found. There's a few mentions of stuff like he is now serving stuff at the Southern Air Temple, which is sort of like obviously something that happens eventually in between Avatar and Korra, but at least the comics haven't got up to that point. So it creates a bit of a weird situation surrounding like, when exactly is this set? It's clearly after the 100-Year War. The Katara stuff with the water tribes as well as Sokka makes it pretty clear that it's also set post North and South, because she's talking about how the sort of water tribes' relationship with food, the different ingredients they now have because the world is more together, has changed, which was part sort of the theme of North and South. But then there's other bits that make it feel like, wait, does this fit in? Because there's a little Azula bit towards the end that kind of feels like, how does this relate to this book? But we'll get there. Monkey Yatso's fruit pies is very cool just to even like see there in the picture, like them done kind of in real life. There's mentions in the flavor text here about, I like to think of them as sweet replicas of the Kalau Mountains near Omashu. And how Gyatso always liked the red one, Aang always preferred the purple one. So just kind of cool. There, onion and banana juice is here. As we move into the water tribe stuff, which, like I said, there's the kind of divider page for water tribes. And again, she talks about, a lot of the stuff came, in the past, a lot of the fruit came exclusively from the oceans. And, they talk about prunes, crabs, squid, infinite variations of seaweed. But now they have ingredients from the Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation because they're more linked with the rest of the world now. And she talks about how she has to express her concern to the council that the delicate cuisine of the water tribes not fade away. So that fits with Katara's characterization in North and South. Sokka's salmon jerky, he sort of talks about how like his dad entrusted him with the foolproof method of making it. And so on. Gran smoked Arctic hen legs. Foggy Swamp Chicken is actually written by Hugh. And it mentions like the banyan grove tree, the philosophy of him as someone who is enlightened, and that a key part of the dish he sees as being the water from the swamp, which you can't find anywhere else. So that's kind of cool. Lightly pickled fish there. And again, there's some decent references in here of like just nearly any time you probably heard a food reference in Avatar, that item probably is featured in this book somewhere. 5 flavor soup, kale cookies, Yue's moon cakes. This is one of the preview pages. I think this one's like okay what's written here. This is where maybe if you get into sort of, does this tonally in a way like sound like Sokka? After Princess Yue's great sacrifice to save the moon spirit and restore balance in the world, the northern water tribes developed a special dessert to honor her life. These gracefully sweet cakes are meant to be consumed with the same love and tenderness that Yue showed to everyone while she was still with us. They are made from some of Yue's favorite roots and seeds, all growing abundantly in the Spirit Oasis waters and encased in a beautiful jade skin like the gentle light she shines upon us. It just kind of feels like, okay, the sentiment, I guess, is sort of there, but the exact wording of that feels a little bit overly, like, almost precise for Sokka, and you almost wish there was a little bit more sort of emotion just out of the text. Kind of similarly, Spirit Oasis tea, Katara narrates this one and talks about how water from the Spirit Oasis has magical healing properties meant only for the severest of injuries, not to be used lightly. But no mention of, like, the water that saved Aang's life that she had to use to bring him back. Just little things like that are kind of a little frustrating. Earth Kingdom section here. Toph talks about sort of the difference between how crazy the giant meals are in like upper rings of Ba Sing Se or some of the wealthier areas like Gaoling versus some of the more kind of outskirts of the Earth Kingdom areas and the different food that they have. And how she almost talks about how like the flavors kind of go up when you go outside the capital and away from there. Aunt Wu's bean curd puffs. Meng gets a mention in that one. Freedom Fighter's roast pork belly, written by the Duke, is actually quite interesting. For all his faults, I still miss Jet a lot. He was the first person ever to take care of me, and just like Aang, he wants to change the world for the better. I think his heart was always in the right place, even if it sometimes took a few detours. And how he thought, Jet taught the Duke how to roast the boars that they would catch near their treetop hideouts to make the food. So that's kind of interesting. Like, that actually feels like, I think it's one of the first times you've really seen the Duke talk about Jet and Jet's death. That sort of stuff is kind of nice, and I wish sort of more of them were a little bit more like that, where there's a clear-cut story to it, where it feels like roughly like half-ish to a degree of the recipes are just the character almost describing the dish, which is sort of described in the ingredients and the preparation, but it's just the character saying that, whereas some of the ones that do have actually a little bit more of a story to them are actually quite well done. Like Song's roasted duck, Iroh just at least notes the idea that, like, oh, this was prepared by Song's mother, and I remember that time quite well. Seared fish, And you can see here the stock art of the Kyoshi warriors. So not just the Suki that we've seen before, but some other Kyoshi warriors in that art as well. It makes me wonder just how much more material is there that we haven't seen out of that stock imagery. Sour cabbage soup, charred cabbage noodles, and there's also cabbage cakes, I think, later on. All 3 items that were mentioned in the Rift. So there's a couple of comic references in here as well, because obviously it's basically acknowledging that like the promise and stuff like that has happened. A few references to the Rift with the cabbage merchant's little restaurant that he has. That's kind of cool. The boulder narrates one, and there's a reference to the pebble, of course, his cat that he has in the comic from the Lost Adventures. Misty Palms gets a couple of references here in the Earth Kingdom section. Suki narrates Kyoshi Island stuffed apple donuts and talks about basically what she does on Kyoshi Day and how she often saves this snack until right at the end, and when the last of the sun's rays are glimmering off the pillars of the Kyoshi Shrine. So there's fun stuff like that. The ones that feel a little bit more specifically like it's this character from this location talking about the speciality of their location, that feels like it's when it's at its best. Genomite is pretty fun. There's the new Boomy stock imagery you can see that was on the card, as well as what like a real life Genomite and approach to that is like. That's pretty fun. Avatar unfried dough for Avatar Day. There's the cabbage cookies, cactus juice, Misty Palms. Here's the Jasmine Dragon tea shop section, which again is focused on the tea. Really cool new stock image of Zuko there with the tea being the server at the tea shop. It's actually one of my favorite ones, the detail on that image there. Very nice. And again, there's nice here. A lot of these are, I think all of them are narrated by Iroh, and he just makes a note of like what each tea kind of offers. And there's one called Red-Blooded Nephew Tea, and it's Zuko's favorite, of course, with the complicated blend of bold, complex flavors that fit his persona as well. Jasmine tea, of course. The bubble tea gets a reference here from the comics, of course, where Iroh is actually in universe, the Avatar character who invented that. Tea leaf juice, so a joke from Iroh at Zuko's expense with the whole hot leaf juice. He's actually made something where you do actually eat the leaves. Bender tea, Fire Nation section. Might be one of the best sections in terms of like you getting like the most sort of maybe story out of the most number of the kind of items. But yeah, they're pretty cool. A lot of these are by Zuko or Iroh, like Komodo chicken. I'll never forget the cold Komodo chicken Zuko brought me when I was locked away in the capital city prison. I almost didn't eat it after he left. My heart was so broken. And it reminds him of a time when they used to sneak into the palace kitchen and steal some food from the chef. Jongwi clams, Roku-style chicken, fire noodles. These are some of the last ones I'll bring up here. The firebending masters. The Sun Warriors gifted me and Aang so much about firebending that I never learned in the Fire Nation school, and I hope to honor their traditions by teaching their philosophy and methods to the next generation. Like my uncle, I promised to never reveal their location or who they are, but that doesn't mean their knowledge will be lost after I step down from the throne. Their forms of firebending movements like the dancing dragon are now mandatory in schools, and their calm yet fiery demeanor thought as the precursor to anyone learning to firebend. It was my uncle that nicknamed this drink a soothing and spicy cleansing tonic to set your mind at ease for firebending practice. So just nice. That's probably the most significant piece of new information that we get, that the dancing dragon is now mandatorily taught in Fire Nation schools. Cool. We never really got an update on what changed effectively with a lot of that stuff, so that's nice to know. Azula's lightning is narrated by Azula, which gets to the point of like, when did this happen? Because it doesn't necessarily fit where Azula is in the story. Is this something from before? Does this imply that Azula does turn around and is friendly with the group to where she can participate in this at some point? I don't know. But she's like appalled when she first heard that this drink was going to bear her name. May convinced her to try it, and she kind of likes it. And she supposes that it's not that bad of a thing. So it's kind of like May convincing her to try it. Is this something that happens before or after? Because like I said, the book makes it pretty clear it's set post-war. and there's no real opportunity for May and Azula to talk like that, so not really sure what's going on there. Ember Island Cherry Ice Cream is narrated by May. Zuko knows this is my favourite flavour of the offerings at the Ember Island ice cream shop. All the other ones are terribly boring. The fact that Azula hates it after her cherry pit incident makes it all the better, honestly. If Ember Island wasn't so annoying to get to, I'd come here all the time just for a cone. It's a real mystery to me why they don't sell it in the capital too. Maybe I should bring that up with my father. Not that he's ever of any use. Again, I'll question this one a little bit. One, how does Azula know about the cherry pit incident when she was in prison at the time? Right at the end of the series? And when would she ever have heard about this? I appreciate the reference and what the attempt is here, but it doesn't necessarily to me make sense for how the character knows this. Similarly, the last bit. Maybe I should bring that up with my father, not that he's ever of any use. Ukano is in prison as of the end of Smoke and Shadow, and we've never heard of him when he or if he gets released. So is she talking about going to see her father in prison, and that's why she says he's not of any use? Or is this, again, from before? And then that puts into question where the timing of this is and stuff like that. But it seems to imply that her father could determine if this is sold elsewhere. I'm not sure. Fire gummies is the last recipe, and that's where the book ends. So overall, sort of final thoughts. If you like to cook and like Avatar, then this seems like a no-brainer. Absolutely get it. Just be aware that if you would like to get an Avatar apron as well, you should probably wait until the gift set release in June next year. Which unfortunately means you'll probably have to just avoid getting this book until that happens. The timing of that announcement feels a bit weird, but anyway. For those of you out there who, I suppose, sort of like myself, don't tend to cook a lot or make things that require tons of ingredients like this and so on, or maybe don't particularly have too much of an interest in making the food from Avatar, and are only really interested in this book because of the sort of potential for that flavor text to have new information. I don't quite think that it presents enough new information. It's better than I thought it would be going in. I really didn't think there'd be anywhere near what we actually got here. So in that sense, it did surprise me, but I still feel coming out of it that there's really only a handful of them where it actually feels like, do you know what, that's actually quite interesting. Like I said, the one about the dancing dragon being thought as the kind of a form of firebending kind of form in school, that's actually a really cool little update that we didn't know about before. But there's so few of them that are like that. And then the majority of them are either just a nice little story that kind of feels like, okay, that's nice. Or it's really just a character describing what the food item is, and that, hey, X character who's my parent or father figure or something like that made this for me, I now make it for other people. Little bland. So the other factor in that is just that this book happens to release at probably the best time possible for it, which is right in the middle of a huge drought of Avatar content in a time period where people are pretty much ravenous for new Avatar content. There is not a sign of a new Avatar or Korra comic being announced, even though it probably should be anytime soon. And there's a massive gap from Suki alone all the way into, I think, May next year, where no new piece of story content is really going to come out outside of the Legends role-playing game. So this kind of has the next couple of months as the only sort of new and interesting thing going on in Avatar. So it kind of feels like, while there isn't a lot going on, kind of why not? And especially coming up to Christmas, as sort of a gift for an Avatar fan, this seems quite good. So this seems like a decent book to maybe be like, hey, I know you'd never know what Avatar thing to get me because I buy most of the Avatar stuff, but get me this cookbook, which I probably wasn't maybe going to get myself. That seems like sort of the best approach with this. Definitely better than I expected. I think the main thing, one thing I can definitely say coming out of this is that I think Jenny Dorsey did an incredible job at trying to make this as interesting as possible. But you can sort of tell the limitations here, which is similar to all of the other books like Avatar Chronicles, Legends, Legacy of the Fire Nation, that the instructions felt like, try and write some flavor text for this, we'll say if it's okay or not, and so there's no real way to overly introduce new information. I like a lot of the references she made to some kind of like place names that aren't super well known, comic references, and a few tiny little things. But I think this book, if it maybe had the assistance from a writer, if Mike and Brian even gave this the most tiny amount of their time, I kind of feel like you could actually get some really, really solid information out of this. That just that flavor text could be like twice as good as it is, even though it's all right in its present state. It's just, inside editions, this tends to be the level of sort of the books that they do, where they're kind of visually interesting, they have something going on, but I tend to never be able to fully give them the sort of full seal of approval of just like, I recommend this on the basis of the just content alone. Even these books, I'm kind of like, get them because you like the kind of cool inserts, like postcard pullouts. Get it because of the new art that's inside, not necessarily because of the text throughout the book. And it's kind of similar here. Except this has the sort of benefit to it that it's a cookbook. If you remove all the Avatar stuff from this, this seems like a pretty nice sort of Asian cuisine kind of cookbook. And then it's like inspired by Avatar. So, you know, it surprised me with how good it was. This was a book where for months and months after its announcement, I was not planning on getting it. It then became abundantly clear that if I didn't get this, I would have basically nothing new Avatar to talk about for months. And that's most of the reason I got it. And it did surprise me. So that has been the review. In the comments, if you have any questions or thoughts on the book, let me know. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.